In just 2 months, TikTok might disappear from the phones of millions of Americans. The ban follows the 2023 hearings with the platform's CEO over the potential security risks posed by its Chinese ownership. But this is more than just tech hysteria. The concerns over TikTok's influence have already led to the app being banned in several countries. This whole thing is a spider's web, involving surveillance, espionage, and propaganda, and at the center of all of it is a plan for revenge 400 years in the making. The year is 1838. China is a global superpower. Western nations are totally dependent on Chinese imports, which means China can basically dictate terms with the rest of the world. Now, Britain is the first to realise this can't be allowed to continue, but they know it's stupid to wage war with a country whose tea export is propping up your entire economy. So instead, they opt for a far more sinister approach. They begin selling opium they sourced from India directly to the Chinese people, and before long, addiction is rampant. People lose their jobs, their homes, and in extreme cases, their lives. The emperor is understandably alarmed by the situation and orders the outright ban of opium within China. But Britain don't take kindly to this, and they retaliate by destroying some of China's key ports. Now, at this point, the Chinese people are no longer in the position to fight back, and they're forced then to sign a series of embarrassing treaties just to end the conflict. And this period came to be known as the Century of Humiliation. But even after all these years, they never forgot. Fast forward to today, and it's fair to say China is in a much better place. They have one of the world's fastest growing economies, their military boasts over 2 million active personnel, and their various initiatives have bolstered their influence across the globe. But even though China is not the pushover it once was, it still can't hope to compete with the powers of the West. I mean, China's GDP per capita is a third of just Taiwan alone. And while its military is huge, it's not battle tested and it's dwarfed by the combined powers of NATO. And as if all that wasn't enough, their one-child policy has left the country on the brink of demographic collapse. So now, China find themselves in the position the West had 200 years ago. But lucky for them, they have some opium of their own. Enter TikTok. With 2 billion active users worldwide, it became the world's most downloaded app of 2022. 90% of the users access the app daily, and Gen Z use it more than all other streaming services combined. But how did the app manage to become so successful? Well, while other apps were using this idea called the sociograph, where they recommend content based on what your friends like, TikTok took this approach called the psychograph. Now, this is where they basically make this sophisticated model of all your interests to kind of predict what content you'll like in the future. And they do this using these weird, sinister techniques like tracking the milliseconds you spend looking at posts, all the way to using your front-facing camera to monitor your micro-expressions. They know what makes you happy, what makes you sad, but most importantly, what keeps you watching. To ensure their success, TikTok recruit the world's leading neuroscientists and behavioral engineers to make the app as addictive as possible. One of the more effective methods they use is called randomized intermittent rewards, which is just a fancy way of saying that if they wanted to, they could show you just exclusively content you love. They know you so well they could do that. But due to the work of B.F. Skinner, they found it's far more effective to show you content that you don't like mixed within, because it means when they finally show you a video you love, it creates this kind of casino jackpot effect in the brain that's been shown to be the most effective way of extracting dopamine. Something we need to make clear before we continue is that this isn't some innocent Chinese company trying to make a name for themselves. No, these people are directly dictated to by the Chinese Communist Party, and every move they make is very addictive. The only proof you need of that is that TikTok isn't even allowed to run domestically in China, and instead they have their own version of the app known as Douyin. And believe me when I say, these apps could not be more different.
In their version of TikTok, if you're under 14 years old, they show you science experiments you can do at home, museum exhibits, patriotism videos, and educational videos. And they also limit it to only 40 minutes per day. Now, they don't ship that version of TikTok to the rest of the world. So it's almost like they recognize that technology is influencing kids' development, and they make their domestic version a spinach version of TikTok, while they ship the opium version to the rest of the world.
But all this raises the question, okay, so kids are watching stupid dance videos, who cares? Well, for one thing, these trends aren't exactly safe. Back in 2021, we saw this massive surge in kids spontaneously developing symptoms of Tourette syndrome just from seeing it on the platform. And sadly, it's not just the content. The algorithm itself is likely causing long-term damage to our brains. See, our brains use dopamine as this reinforcement mechanism to drive behaviors that are linked with our survival. And it's supposed to reinforce these long-term behaviors, like hunting, relationship building, not crying instantaneously when you look at yourself in the mirror. The feedback loop is so rapid that it starts eroding our attention spans. In 2004, the average attention span was 2.5 minutes, and today it's just 47 seconds. That doesn't sound like much, but that's a 66% decrease since the release of Shrek 2. What's worse is the same techniques that TikTok uses have been linked with this idea of digital dementia, which is this significant uptick in depression and anxiety among users compared with non-users. Something that's so crazy is a guy predicted all of this 30 years ago. In 1996, David Foster Wallace released his book, Infinite Jest. The story revolves around a movie so good, people can't stop watching it. When people do start watching the film, they're compelled to watch it over and over again until their lives fall apart. Terrorists even start using the film and mailing it to people in order to ruin their lives. And if you've ever used TikTok, you know just how quickly time gets sucked away. You sit down to watch something for 15 minutes, then lift your head and realize 2 hours have just disappeared. And all you wanted was to see some feet. Modern day China is a surveillance state. There's 700 million cameras in China. That means that there is one surveillance camera for every 2 people. When a BBC reporter tried to hide from the cameras as an experiment somewhere in mainland China, it took the authorities all of 7 minutes to find him. And now, China's trying to export this surveillance state abroad. 2 years ago, a clip went viral of Joe Rogan outlining all of TikTok's shady practices they list in their terms of service. In the same year, TikTok admitted to using the app to spy on journalists to prevent them leaking information about these shady practices. But just like China didn't take the opium seriously until it was too late, we're probably being led down the exact same path. The app actively promotes content that causes polarization and infighting. Like, if we're fighting amongst ourselves, they don't even need to lift a finger to win. The app has 150 million active users, and it is the main news source for Gen Z. Thing is, we've known this has been the strategy of the West's enemies for decades now. The KGB defector Yuri Bezmenov outright told us to our face back in the 1980s.
According to my opinion and opinion of many defectors of my caliber, only about 15% of time, money and manpower is spent on espionage as such. The other 85% is a slow process which we call either ideological subversion or active measures, активные мероприятия in the language of the KGB, or psychological warfare. What it basically means is to change the perception of reality of every American to such an extent that despite of the abundance of information, no one is able to come to sensible conclusions in the interests of defending themselves, their families, their community and their country.
And guess what? It's working. In the past year, we've seen support for the terrorist group Hamas, North Korea, and even praise for Osama bin Fuckface. The 1962 film The Manchurian Candidate follows the story of a Korean War vet who returns home brainwashed and seeks to do the bidding of the Communist Party in the West. Today, we have a propaganda weapon in the pockets of millions of people just waiting to be activated. I realize that sounds crazy, but in this video from the military analyst Ryan Macbeth, he shows just how easy it would be to use the app to recruit enough people to shut down a major highway in the US Capitol.
I went and got a TikTok advertiser account, and know that I am so afraid of TikTok that I did it on a virtual machine behind a VPN. That's how scared I am of TikTok. Now, note that if you see me on TikTok, it's a person that stole my content. Multiple people pretend to be me on TikTok, and TikTok never does anything about it. But let's do the demo. So let's say I want to shut down I-495, which is the main highway in Washington, D.C., and I'm going to protest Gaza. Here's how I would go about doing it through TikTok. I'm going to log into my TikTok merchant account, and I'm going to choose lead generation. I'm going to choose a custom audience and choose DC, Maryland, and Virginia. So basically people who live near the Beltway. I'm also going to choose a custom audience, which is females between the ages of 18 and 34. Now the reason I'm going to do this is that I'm basically targeting the kind of radicalized women that we see in this post and the ones who tried to shut down Mayor Bowser in Washington, D.C. And I want to target these women because if you invite women, men will come. I'm also looking for people who liked, commented, or shared social news, social issues, or environmental protection issues. These people are more likely to attend a protest than people who just pass the video by and didn't do anything. So in this case, I want the protest to be March 26th of 2024. That is a Tuesday, and the reason I'm choosing that is for maximum carnage. A lot of people in Washington, D.C. work from home on Mondays and on Fridays. So we're going to go for a Tuesday so we can cause the biggest traffic jam we can. I'm going to give myself a budget of $1,000 a day. I said that. And I'm going to set this to run from the 13th to the 25th, which is 13 days. So we're talking $13,000. This should give me between 52 and 156 leads per day.
So here's the thing. All doom and gloom, but what now? What can actually be done? Well, the good news is the problem has started to get some recognition, the recognition that it deserves. Authors like Jonathan Haidt have made significant ground with their work trying to warn people of the harms that social media can have on young people. As for the threat posed by foreign ownership, China is wise enough to not allow foreign apps like YouTube, Facebook, Instagram to operate within its borders. They know how powerful foreign influence can be and how much of a golden weapon social media can be to achieve these aims. So this threat needs to be taken seriously. Western governments have to be lobbied to ban the app or at least force domestic ownership. But all of that could take years. So in the meantime, maybe we just need to recognize that these apps don't have to control us. We can all put the phones down, walk away, and finally touch some grass.